Welcome to Chapter 5, Parties and Campaigns in the States. The two major political parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, offer slates of candidates to lead us. Candidates campaign hard for the high-profile jobs of governor, state legislator, mayor, and the various other state and local positions. In some states, even candidates for judicial positions compete in partisan races. But party involvement in our system of government does not end on Election Day. The institutions of government themselves have a partisan tone. Legislatures are organized along party lines. Governors offer Republican or Democrat agendas for their states. County commissioners of different ideological stripes fight over the best way to provide services to local residents. Through the actions of their elected officials, political parties play a major role in the operation of government. The condition of contemporary American political parties has been described with words such as decline, decay, and demise. In some ways, the description is accurate, but in other ways, it is overstated. True, the number of people who identify with one of the major parties is on the decline. But at the same time, the party organization has become more professional, taking on new tasks and playing new roles in politics and governance. Parties have more financial and technological resources at their disposal. Thus, to some observers, political parties are enjoying a period of revitalization and rejuvenation. While the debate over the condition of political parties is sure to continue, it seems clear that they have undergone a transformation, and they will continue to adapt. Our book describes political parties as a central feature on the American political landscape. Staunch supporters of political parties often cite scholars who have determined that without parties there would be no democracy. One of my most favorite scholars, E. Schattschneider, posits that political parties created modern democracy, and modern democracy is unthinkable save in terms of parties. While many agree with this assessment, there's less agreement as to whether today's political parties have successfully played all the roles that early party supporters proclaimed that they could. Others debate whether the American system of government is more party-centered or more candidate-centered. Do voters pay more attention to the party affiliation of a candidate or to the candidate's personal attributes, such as age, looks, gender, race, campaign style, political ads, and debate skills? We discussed in the last section that a political party seeks to control governmental policy by winning elective office. There are two primary models that scholars use to describe elections: the responsible party model and the candidate-centered model. Let's take a look at the responsible party model first. The responsible party model is a party system in which each party offers clear policy alternatives and holds their elected officials responsible for enacting these policies in office. Responsible parties are supposed to develop and clarify alternative policy positions for the voters, educate people about the issues, recruit candidates for office, organize and direct those candidates to win elections, hold their elected officials responsible after they're elected, and then organize the legislature to ensure party control of policymaking. By carrying out these functions, responsible parties are supposed to modify the demands of special interests, build a consensus that could win majority support, and provide simple and meaningful choices for the voters on Election Day. In this way, disciplined, issue-oriented, and competitive parties are seen as the principal means by which the people would direct public policy and hold elected officials accountable. Critics say that such a party system would make bipartisanship much more difficult. There are many criticisms of this model, because the parties generally do not offer voters clear policy alternatives, and voter decisions are not motivated primarily by policy considerations. And in reality, American political parties have no way to bind their elected officials to party positions or even to their campaign pledges. And because one of the primary issues is that there are typically no clear policy alternatives, it's because each party tries to capture the broad center of the policy arena to appeal to the most voters, especially those voters that are not attached to either party. Another problem with this model is that the candidate's image is often the primary consideration of the voter, not the party, especially to those voters who are not attached to a particular party. The candidate-centered politics has become more popular due to the advent of primary elections, the decline in party identification, and the increase in split-ticket voting. And that's when you have the tendency for voters to vote for one, say a Republican for governor, but for a Democrat for their state Senate or their state House member. There's also the increased focus on the candidate rather than on the party, the influence of the mass media, the decline in political patronage, and the rise of single-issue interest groups. Now, Under the candidate-centered model, individual candidates rather than the parties raise their own money, create their own personal campaign organizations, and the candidates rely on professional consultants to direct their campaigns. In my 20 years of experience in politics, this is the way that I have seen campaigns work. The candidate sets up his or her own campaign operation at the local, state, and federal level. The candidate recruits their own volunteers, the candidate raises their own money, the candidate hires their own consultants, and the candidate executes their own plan. Local party organizations do help with the grassroots efforts, and the state party does help with things like doing mailings. The national party only gets involved with federal level races, and that's only if it's a close race. The book refers to something called shoe leather campaigning. This is what I would refer to as grassroots campaigning, like knocking on doors, attending fairs and festivals, those types of things. The book also refers to the decline of political patronage, and that's definitely the case when you're talking about official jobs with the federal bureaucracy. But if you're looking for a job with an elected official, the best way to be considered for one is to volunteer in a political campaign. Elected officials don't typically put ads on Indeed or LinkedIn. They look to their own hardworking volunteer base from their campaigns for employees first. So despite the decline, parties still perform important political functions. They perform functions like organizing elections, especially through the use of primary elections by narrowing the choices for voters. Although the role of party organizations is to supplement the candidate's own personal organization, the role of the party organizational strength can affect elections. For example, Southern Republican parties were initially unable to take advantage of the inroads made by Republican presidential candidates in the 1950s and 60s because their organizations were weak. However, the spectacular gains by Republican candidates for congressional, state, and local office in more recent years are, in large measure, a product of a much stronger Republican organization. The real significance of party organizational strength is not so much its impact in any given year, but rather that such strength provides the infrastructure for candidates and activists to continue to compete in the face of short-term defeats and even long-term minority status, and also to take advantage of favorable conditions when they occur. For example, a scandal, an opposition incumbent's retirement, or divisiveness within the other party, or a shift in the public mood. Studies of state parties have generally shown that Republicans are stronger organizationally than their Democratic counterparts. But this may be changing as more campaign money flows to non-party organizations. In the past, Republican state organizations tended to be a more important source of campaign support than did Democratic Party organizations. This does not mean that Democratic candidates were necessarily lacking or unequal in resources, but it does mean that Democrats traditionally relied more heavily for assistance on allied non-party groups, like labor unions, teachers, environmentalists, and trial lawyers, for help to supply money in campaign workers. Democratic state parties thus tend to be more labor-intensive than the more capital-intensive Republican organizations. One other important task is the job of organizing state legislatures by voting for leadership. The majority party regularly votes for its own candidates for these posts. So if there are more Democrats in the state house, then the Speaker of the House will be a Democrat, and the chairs of all of the committees will also be Democrats. For a party to choose a nominee for the general election ballot, one candidate must be selected from a group of possible candidates. In the pre-Jacksonian era, party nominees were chosen by a legislative caucus, that is, a conference of the party's legislators. Then, the progressive movement sought to open up the nomination process and make it more democratic, and political parties adopted the primary system, where voters choose from among several candidates to select their nominee for the general election. But before the primary election, the candidate must collect enough signatures to get on the ballot. The states set their own rules for getting on the ballot, the number of signatures required for each office, and the period of time during which the signatures may be collected. There's typically a small fee required also. A candidate does not have to have the support of a local party to file for office. A few things you may find interesting about filing. In Pennsylvania, a person needs 10 signatures to run for the local school board, while someone seeking to run for the U.S. House needs 1,000. But in Ohio, a person seeking to run for the U.S. House only needs 50 signatures. That's a big difference. 1,000 signatures versus 50 signatures to basically seek the same office. But in 2000 In 2018, a Republican person seeking to run for the U.S. House from South Dakota needed 1,955 signatures. This is 1% of the vote that was votes cast for the 2014 Republican gubernatorial candidate, while a Democrat needed only 705 signatures, 1% of the total vote cast for the Democrat candidate. So the number is fixed in Ohio and Pennsylvania, and it changes in South Dakota based upon the votes cast for their gubernatorial candidates. Primaries reduce the influence of the party organization on the political process, and many local county parties stay neutral during the primary and try to help all of the candidates. However, the party faithful sometimes don't stay neutral, and you end up with a family feud, with some people supporting one candidate while some support another. State party organizations will often endorse in a statewide race in an attempt to weed out candidates who don't have the grassroots support, the qualifications, or the financial backing to mount a successful campaign. Primaries can be divided into two types, closed and open. The only voters who can participate in a closed primary for a particular party are those who are registered in that party. An open primary does not require party membership. Even this basic distinction, however, lends itself to some variation. States differ in terms of ease with which voters can change party affiliation and participate in the closed primary of the other party. In most states, the plurality winner of the party's primary election, the candidate receiving the most votes, whether a majority or not, becomes the party's nominee. But in some states, the nominee must win a majority to become the party's nominee. If no candidate succeeds in winning a majority in the first primary, a runoff primary is held between the top two vote getters. Presumably, the runoff primary encourages candidates to seek majority support and prevents extremist candidates from winning nominations. No one can win a nomination by relying on splits among multiple opponents. A few states continue to use conventions to nominate their candidates, New York and Connecticut, for example. At these meetings, the party members choose the party's nominee, write the party's platform, and rally party support. Each state party plays a key role in selecting their party's presidential candidate via a primary or a caucus. At the presidential primary, the voters select the presidential candidate for whom they want their party's delegates to the National Convention to nominate as the party's candidate for president. Presidential candidates are also selected at a caucus, but a caucus is a meeting of voters where they choose who they prefer to be their party's standard bearer in the race for president. So a presidential primary is a regular election and a caucus is a meeting, just to keep those two straight. Political parties are decentralized organizations with 50 state Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Constitution, Green, Socialist, and Communist parties, to name a few. Each state also has local party organizations, most typically at the county level. Although they interact, each of these units is autonomous, a situation that promotes independence but is not that helpful to promoting party cohesion and party discipline. Specialized partisan groups, including the College Democrats, the Young Republicans, Democratic Women's Clubs, and Black Republican Councils, have been accorded official recognition. Party organizations are further decentralized into precinct-level clusters, which bear the ultimate responsibility for turning out the party's voters on Election Day. State governments vary in how closely and vigorously they regulate political parties. In states with few laws, parties have more discretion in their organization and functions. Regardless, each state party has a charter or bylaws to govern its operation. The decision-making body is called State Committee, or sometimes called a Central Committee, and it's headed by a chairperson and comprised of members from throughout the state elected in party primaries or state party conventions. Like we already discussed, state party organizations differ in their organizational vitality and resources. State parties, officially at least, lead their party's push to capture statewide elected offices. County party organizations are comprised of committee members chosen at the precinct level. Local parties are typically less professionally organized than state parties, even though many of them have year-round campaign headquarters and participate in every election cycle, from local school board to president. This is often where most of the grassroots work gets done. These are the people known as the party faithful, knocking on doors, getting petition signatures, and working at fairs on behalf of the candidates. State legislative candidates report that local parties are the most helpful when finding volunteers and getting voters to the polls. One thing to keep in mind is that people who are active in the party organizations tend to be strong ideologues. They take consistently liberal or conservative positions on the issues. This graphic shows how the political parties are built from the bottom up. The very bottom level, the dark green, represents the voters, also known as the party in the electorate. These could be people who actually identify as a member of a particular party or just tend to vote a certain way. The pink layer represents the city, ward, or precinct committee. For example, if you live in Brookings, South Dakota, you could belong to the Brookings City Republican Committee, which would work to get Republicans elected to city council and a local school board. They would also belong to the Brookings County Republican Committee, the purple level, and they would also work to elect Republicans to county level jobs. And they would also assist the South Dakota Republican Party, the light green level, which would work to elect statewide candidates, state legislative candidates, and assist with presidential races. The South Dakota Republican Party would also participate with the Republican National Committee, the blue level, by electing 2 members, 1 male and 1 female, to the National Committee. And those 2 people would elect a national chair, the orange level, for the party. Keep in mind that the voters in the dark green level choose the people who are elected to the city, county, and state committees. Anyone can volunteer at the local parties, but to be a voting member on the committee, you have to be elected or appointed. These days, you will find that both Democrats and Republicans offer credible candidates for state offices. The extension of inter-party competition to states that lacked it in the past is a healthy development in American politics. Citizens who are dissatisfied with the performance of the party in power have another choice. Another way of thinking about inter-party competition is to examine which party controls the major policy-making institutions in the state, the governor's office and the state legislature. Generally, there is a link between the partisan composition of the electorate and partisan control of the state's institutions. When the governorship and both legislative chambers are controlled by the state party, the result is unified government. But the electorate-institution relationship is not a simple one. Sometimes control of policy-making institutions is split between the 2 parties, and the result is called divided government. It is important to realize that even with unified partisan control of state institutions, the governor and the legislature may still be at odds, jockeying for political power. 2-party competition has spread at a time when states are becoming the battleground for the resolution of difficult policy issues. Partisan politics will likely encourage a wider search for policy alternatives and result in innovative solutions. In the view of many, 2 parties are better than 1. Heated partisan competition turns a dull campaign into a lively contest, sparking citizen interest and increasing voter turnout. In governance, however, many believe that unified government is preferable to divided government. When competitive elections produce unified party control of government institutions, it is easier for the public to hold the party accountable for what it does or does not do while in office. Legislative gridlock, the failure to enact significant pieces of legislation, is often attributed to divided party government. Studies of state legislature have shown that the overall number of bills passed is not affected by divided party government. However, it has been shown that divided party government makes the passage of controversial legislation more difficult. This graphic is different from the one in the book. The book shows the election results from 2012. These are the actual results from 2016. Party competition among the 50 states is uneven and dynamic and can change from election to election, especially in states that are considered to be purple or more competitive. Some states that are expected to be very competitive in the 2020 election are Florida. It has been close since 1992, a 100% swing state. Florida is the most crucial swing state in the country. Pennsylvania should be competitive. It was very close in 2016. It has evenly balanced rural and city population. Wisconsin should be competitive, and Ohio. No Republican has ever won without Ohio, and Democrats don't usually win without Ohio either. Ohio is very important. Nevada was very close in 2016, and New Hampshire has been a swing state since 2000. Also expected to be competitive are North Carolina, which was a battleground in 2016, Virginia, another battleground state in 2016, Texas, and Michigan. Party leaders, campaign strategists, and political analysts use measures like party turnover, margin of victory, and divided control to gauge the odds they will face in any campaign. The perceived level of competition affects the party's ability to recruit candidates, raise money, and engage volunteers. Republican Party strength is greatest in states in the South and Mountain West, while Democratic strength is strongest in the Northeast and Pacific Coast. However, states change as their demographic makeup shifts. Generally, however, party competition in many states is stronger today due to changes in their population mix. At the same time, the public's overall trust in the two major parties is lower, driven in large part by their disgust with partisan gridlock at the national level. Now, the bimodal distribution of opinion occurs when most voters are clearly divided in their ideologies and policy preferences, thereby causing the parties to take divergent policy positions. Basically, this means that the two parties will take different policy positions, making it more difficult to work out compromises on critical issues. Party competition is most likely to produce policy differences if there is bimodal distribution of voter preferences in a state, and if the parties have a strong organization and ideologically motivated activists. Then the parties in that state will offer clear policy alternatives. So if there's really no major party competition, you're not going to find clear policy alternatives in a state. Professional public relations specialists, pollsters, creative social media experts, and advertising geniuses play a larger role in political campaigns than ever before. They help to craft the candidate's image, help her to hone her message, produce TV and radio spots, write speeches, post to social media, and conduct polls to measure how the campaign is doing. These are important tasks, and they are also expensive tasks. Incumbents are more likely to have the money necessary to hire seasoned political consultants. Challengers often struggle to raise the money necessary to purchase these services. Polling is an important part of the strategic decision-making for a campaign. Polls can be used to test the name recognition of all the candidates in the race, test potential themes, determine what issues might be most important, and also determine the strengths and weaknesses of the candidates. It is important that the polling be done appropriately in order for it to be accurate. Scientific, random selection of actual registered or likely voters is what you need to get an accurate poll. It doesn't matter if you poll people who aren't going to vote, because their opinion really doesn't matter. Internet polls are notoriously unscientific. The people who participate in these are self-selected and can vote more than once if they have access to different IP addresses, so don't trust those polls. Media campaigning typically refers to earned media coverage. Candidates want the media to cover their campaigns with free mentions on the news or in the newspaper. This coverage is more valuable than the ads they have to pay for. Negative ads are very controversial, but they can be effective. Voters often will cast their ballots against candidates they have come to dislike. Analyses of the impact of negative ads shows it varies by whom is delivering the message, who is receiving the message, and by whether the criticism is a personal attack or an attack on a candidate's issue position. Negative ads focusing on issues have a greater impact than attacks on a candidate's personal qualities. To campaign for public office is to spend money, a lot of money. Winning an election takes money, whether the candidate's own money or someone else's money. Recent research has confirmed several long-standing truths about the cost of campaigning. For instance, close elections cost more than elections in which one candidate is sure to win, since uncertainty regarding an election outcome is sure to spur spending. A candidate quickly learns that it is easier to get money from political contributors when the polls show that she has a chance of winning. There may be another side benefit to increased campaign spending, and that is an increase in voter turnout. A study of state legislative elections revealed a link between expenditure levels and turnout. So it's very important that a candidate have enough money to run a successful campaign. Even before a candidate starts buying media, producing radio and TV spots, elections cost money. Candidates need campaign material. They need bumper stickers, yard signs, lapel stickers, business cards, a website, social media, some kind of giveaway like a nail file or a chip clip, and a rack card with information about the candidate they can leave with voters when the candidate goes door to door. The candidate also needs money to buy tickets for the events he is going to go to and money to put gas in her car. In local races, the money comes from individuals. In state and federal races, money comes from individuals and from PACs. Some states have limits on how much a person or a PAC can donate, and some states do not. The federal government does have limits for federal elections. Some candidates will use their own money to fund their race. This is not always successful at the state level because some people don't like when they think that rich people are buying an election. But it's helpful to raise money for your own campaign. People who donate money to your campaign are also going to vote for that candidate. And on election day, candidates need votes. Public opinion surveys consistently show that the public thinks too much money is spent on political campaigns. Concern over escalating costs and the influence of deep-pocketed special interests in campaigns have led reform groups such as Common Cause to call for improved state laws to provide comprehensive and timely disclosure of campaign finances, impose limitations on contributions by individuals and groups, create a combined public-private financing mechanism for primaries and general elections, and establish an independent commission to enforce tough sanctions on violators of campaign finance laws. States have performed impressively on the first of these recommendations. In fact, all states have some sort of campaign financing reporting procedures. States have also long set at least some minimal limits on campaign activities. Most ban election day expenditures, and all prohibit bribery and vote buying. One approach to reducing the influence of private money on elections is to provide public subsidies to defray the cost of campaigns. Almost half of the states provide some form of state financing of elections that channels public funds to candidates, political parties, or both. The Federal Election Campaign Act of 1974 placed limits on the size of individual campaign contributions, required disclosure of campaign finances, provided for public funding of presidential elections through a tax check-off on federal tax returns, and established the Federal Election Commission to supervise elections. The Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act of 2002 aims at controlling the flow of soft money, but reports from subsequent election cycles suggest that loopholes remain. Soft money is unregulated funds contributed to national political parties and non-party political groups. Contributions from individuals to a federal candidate are now $2,700 per individual per election cycle. So what that means is that you as an individual are allowed to contribute $2,700 to your member of Congress per election cycle. So $2,700 for the general and for the primary. And if you're a PAC, you can give $5,000 for the general and for the primary. The Supreme Court has been reluctant to limit campaign expenditures in the interest of protecting free speech. So far there are no limits on campaign expenditures. So do campaign finance reforms work? It's not clear whether state campaign finance laws actually succeed in limiting overall spending in elections, because money that is now prohibited in one area will probably be spent in another. So have political parties as we know them outlive their usefulness? Will they be cast aside as new forms of political organization take their place, or will the candidate-centered election take precedence? As some have argued, a more educated populace that can readily acquire political information via the internet is likely to be less reliant on party cues. Today's generation is less loyal to political parties and is not so likely to vote along party lines. The two major political parties are not sitting idly by as their function in the political system is challenged. Party organizations are making their operations more professional and relevant and have more money and more staff to assist candidates who are seeking office. They are actively seeking to make their organizations more meaningful to younger voters and are doing their best to adapt to a changing environment with a renewed commitment to getting out the vote and educating voters about their choices. So don't forget to read the article about trends shaping redistricting. Although it's from 2012, we are coming up on another census in 2020, another round of redistricting. This issue remains a hot button issue because of the legal, political, and geographical constraints that go into redrawing districts. Like the article states, it's not an easy task, and in many states it is a very partisan process because the state legislatures draw the districts, which often leads to legal challenges and increased public cynicism about the process. Some states use citizen committees to draw the districts, and there is very sophisticated mapping software that is part of the process also. Keep in mind these committees are drawing state House and Senate districts and U.S. House districts. So our maps have both state and federal representation implications, and everyone is paying attention. So if you have any questions on Chapter 5, please let me know, and have a great week.